Welcome to Future Talk. On today's program, we're going to discuss intelligent machines. What can they do? What will they be able to do in the future? What are the benefits and risks of using such machines? And what can they teach us about ourselves? My guest is Steve Omohundro, who's worked in the field of artificial intelligence for many years as a scientist, a professor, an author, and an entrepreneur. He recently founded Self-Aware Systems, a think tank dedicated to bringing positive human values to intelligent technologies. Steve, welcome to the program.
Oh, thank you. Happy to be here.
Good to have you today. Steve, what do you think is the most important trend in artificial intelligence today?
Well, I think there are a lot of intellectual developments that are happening that are very exciting, but the most exciting thing, I think, is that all of the major companies seem to be investing heavily in this area. IBM just announced they're investing $1 billion in Watson, which is their AI system. Siri, which Apple has, is sort of moving into a more and more intelligent way of being. And Google has been investing a lot. They just bought 8 robot companies. So I think there's a lot of action in this area right now. And so the next few years should be very interesting.
Now, where are we going to really see all this in our lives?
Well, already having phones that you can talk to. Right now, they don't understand us very well, but as the years progress, you can expect these systems to get better and better at understanding. And then robots are really big. The company that builds the Apple iPhone is called Foxconn in China, and they have a manufacturing plant, and they've decided that even in China, that labor is too expensive. They're buying 1 million robots to put together iPhones and other devices like that. And so I think we should see a major shift in manufacturing over the next decade or so.
What are some of the problems that have to be solved to produce artificial intelligence? Is there anything you have to figure out or have insight into to make it work?
Well, what's interesting, the original term artificial intelligence was invented around 1960, and scientists at that time thought, it'll be about 5 years or so before we have machines which are as smart as people. They grossly underestimated how challenging it was, and interestingly, the things that are easy for us, like distinguishing a dog from a cat, turned out to be really hard for these AI systems, where stuff that's very hard for us, like playing a good game of chess, turns out to be pretty easy for these systems. And so our sense of what's easy and what's hard turns out to be different than we thought it was. And so common sense knowledge and having semantics and understanding of how the world works, that's been sort of the biggest hurdle that these systems haven't yet overcome.
And putting intelligence into machines, does that necessarily force us to develop greater insight into our own intelligence and our own thought process?
Well, I think that's going to be the most exciting and interesting aspect of these changes over the next few decades, is that as we begin to build intelligent systems, they're going to serve as a kind of mirror to us. In addition to sort of helping us do things that we couldn't do before, or doing things cheaper, like manufacturing and so on, it's going to be a whole new era where we can begin to explore what is the nature of thought? What is the nature of consciousness? What are human values? As we build these systems, we're going to build them to reflect the things that we most want in the world. And so I think it's going to sort of focus our attention on that in a way that's never happened in history before.
Now, do you see artificial intelligence as a force just for good, or is there a downside also? Might it come back and bite us somehow?
Well, so one of the areas that's getting a lot of funding is, of course, the military. The military has tremendous need for very powerful force and for making decisions in a smart way. Military robots, maybe they have good and bad consequences.
Smart bombs.
Smart bombs. Drones are a very popular thing right now. So drones are going to get smarter and smarter. Anti-drones, right? The opponents aren't going to sit there and allow drones to just drop bombs on you. So it's going to be arms races in a variety of areas, and that could be dangerous. One thing I've thought a lot about is unintended consequences, that we build these systems, we give them goals that we think are going to be good, but in fact they end up doing things that we didn't expect. And I think that's the biggest worry that I have, and where I think there's a lot of scientific insight that's needed to really make sure that the choices we make actually lead to a good outcome.
One of the issues might be the privacy issue, because with social networking nowadays, pretty much everything you do in your life can be tracked. So we all know more about each other, which might be considered a good thing, but there's a downside as well. Maybe you don't want the world to know everything you're doing in your life.
Yeah, a few years back, David Brin wrote a wonderful book called The Transparent Society, in which he argued, and rightfully so, I think, that the cost of cameras is getting cheaper and cheaper. Every cell phone now has a camera, so cameras are only like $1 to manufacture, and they're getting smaller and smaller. And once you have, say, drones with cameras on them flying all over the place, privacy as we have known it is probably likely to go away. And his point was that when we think about Big Brother, we often think of surveillance, sort of, you know, the government officials or the police sort of watching everybody and keeping track of people so that they can sort of catch innocent people. He argues that what will really happen most likely is surveillance. So sur is the French word for over, sous is the French word for under, in which all of us will have our own little, you know, phone cameras, and with Google Glass and similar wearable technologies, most people will begin to be recording every aspect of their lives. And so we'll be watching what government officials do, what police officers do, what you know, the agents of the state. And so there'd be more of a balanced thing, he would argue.
Now, could that be a problem? Because, you know, most people have contradictions in their lives. Most people have things that they don't necessarily want to bring to the light of day. And if all of a sudden your life is being observed, that could create enormous stress, which could manifest itself in rather unpleasant ways.
Yeah, and so I think that one of the big changes that the surveillance issue and the AI issue is going to bring about is we're going to have to pass laws that we actually want enforced. Like today, most people speed at times on the freeway, and most of the time you don't get caught because there's only, you know, patrol cars every so often. It won't be very long before there'll be cameras all along every highway, and if, as a society, we decide to, we could make every speeding infraction be detected and a ticket mailed to you immediately. And so, do we want that? And so I think the whole AI area is going to cause us to rethink exactly what kinds of laws do we want and what behaviors do we want to encourage and discourage.
Well, you said something earlier about human values. So what sort of human values are we talking about here? Can you give an example of a human value that we're concerned about?
Well, I think the basic struggle is the one between competition and cooperation. And humanity for ages has had this battle. You know, if you look at all the moral systems of every religion and every moral code, it's all about how much do you do for yourself versus how much do you do for the greater good of the society that you belong to. And it's a struggle that I think each person has within themselves. And these technologies will allow individuals to have power way beyond what they do today. I mean, already we see a huge divide between, say, the wealthy and the poor, and that divide is getting bigger and bigger. These systems are likely to make that
Well,
bigger.
can you do both? Because humanity has always been divided into multiple groups, and so you cooperate with the people in your group against the people in the competing groups.
Yeah, that has been the nature in a lot of different societies. The whole world, though, is becoming wired. A lot of people are talking about the global brain, the sense in which the internet is hooking up everybody on the planet. And more people, I think, are beginning to identify themselves not with their particular country or their particular ethnic group, but rather with the whole of humanity. And exactly how that plays out, of course, there are going to be, you know, dissenting groups, I think is going to be very interesting.
Well, there are many different worldviews, and some of them are quite incompatible with each other. And a lot of people seem to be willing to fight to make sure that their worldview is the one that prevails. And technology doesn't seem to have changed that any. That's still very present.
Yeah, somebody has the notion of the filter bubble, which is when you do a search on the internet, the search engines are modeling. What are you interested in? What things do you click on? And so they're using simple AI techniques to build a model of you and to show you more of what things that you'll like. And this, on the one hand, is good. It means that more of the things that come up for you are things that you care about. On the other hand, it distorts your view of reality. So you might think that, for instance, the Wikipedia is like an unbiased source of what the consensus of humanity thinks. There's the Conservapedia, which presents the conservative worldview, looks just like the Wikipedia, and if that's your philosophy, maybe you'll go there, and you'll see an entirely different view of different questions. And so it's possible that the internet could fragment into totally different conceptual systems, and I think we're beginning to see that to some extent today.
Now, many people think that it would be desirable if the whole human race could unite as one, and other people think that that's impractical, and it's better to have different groups, that somehow there's more growth and development when there is competition. Do you think there's one right way that it should be done, or it'll just take its course? regardless.
Well, I think that's going to be the big challenge. Certainly exploring different alternatives, having tolerance for different perspectives and different approaches, that's a wonderful thing. Once it gets to wars and people killing one another, I think as our technologies get more powerful, that's going to become more and more dangerous. And that today's level of, we've got little battles and warfare going on all over the place. When you have much more powerful, say, robotic-based weapons, I think that's not going to be an acceptable thing. So I think we need to come to a society in which we eliminate war while preserving the kinds of differences and the kinds of explorations, competitive explorations that actually lead to positive outcome. How we choose that is the big question. And who gets to choose that, I think, is the big question.
Well, some people feel that they have something to gain by war. People who have everything they want or need prefer peace because then they get to keep it. But there are lots of people who don't have what they want or need and feel the only way they're going to get it is to take it away from somebody else.
Yeah, and I think another topic that we sort of touched on a little earlier is as robots begin to take over more and more of the labor, there aren't going to be jobs, or at least the kinds of jobs that there are today. Many people are not going to be able to do that kind of work in a way that is more cost-effective than robots. And so we probably are going to need to shift the way our economic system works so that so there isn't a huge divide between the haves and the have-nots.
Now, many people have said that all this technology is going to raise everybody's standard of living, so we'll have a much higher material standard. Now, is that necessarily good? Is the goal to remove all the adversity from life, or is adversity desirable because it challenges you and makes you become better?
Yeah, that gets to the core issue. What do we want? What is an ideal future? Sometimes you see parents that take care to make sure their child never has a negative experience. And those children typically don't grow up very psychologically healthy. I like to use the Maslow hierarchy as a way to think about what are human needs and values. And he sort of thinks of them as a pyramid. The base of the pyramid is pure survival needs, that you need food and water and air, shelter, health care. Once you have those met, then you can have social needs, where friendship, love, romance, connection, a sort of a peer group. Once you have that met, you can have self-esteem needs, ways of, bringing your thoughts and your experiences and your skills into the world. Once that's met, you can have transcendent needs, more kind of a spiritual sense of meaning, a sense of leaving a legacy. He viewed them as built one on top of the other in the sense that, if you don't have enough to eat, you probably can't be thinking too much about more transcendent things. More recent studies have shown that the needs he identified were right, that they don't necessarily have to come one after another, though.
Now, this sort of relates to the question of consciousness, and that also relates to the question of machines. Is it possible for a machine to be conscious? Is consciousness just a byproduct of a biochemical reaction, which conceivably could be replicated? Or is consciousness more basic, not dependent on matter, self-existent, in which case it might be pretty hard to put it into a machine?
Yeah. And so those two philosophical positions have been sort of battling for many years. The philosophers have been thinking about it. And I think these machines are going to really give us some new tools to make headway in answering that question. Philosophers sometimes talk about philosophical zombies, which are entities which behave from the outside just like, say, a person might. So they answer questions as if they were a person. They say they have feelings. They say that they're conscious. But secretly, they don't actually have any conscience. They don't feel anything. They're just a mechanical device. And if that can exist, then perhaps these AI machines will have that character. Perhaps consciousness is something that's outside of the computational character. Most neuroscientists today, I think, believe that consciousness is an emergent effect of biochemistry. But I'd say the jury is still very much out, and it's going to be quite an interesting investigation to sort of begin to tease that apart.
Is there anything that a human intelligence can do that a machine cannot do, even in theory? For example, can a machine come up with an original idea? Can a machine use inductive logic as well as deductive logic, derive something new by reaching outside of itself?
Yeah, I mean, one of the sort of tropes is that something is viewed as impossible until a machine is actually successful at doing it, and then people view it as trivial. Playing chess might be an example. It was viewed as, a brilliant creation of the human mind until machines actually beat the world chess champion, and now, it's a simple algorithm that does it. It wasn't that hard after all. It's that kind of thinking. There are research groups around the country right now basically everything, composing music. There's a guy in Atlanta who's got a robot that will jam with you, a robot musician that has the spontaneous, impromptu jazz riffing that a human musician might. There are robots that draw paintings, creative art. There are robots that try and recognize emotional expression, facial expressions, that generate faces that have emotional expressions. And so gradually, people are focusing on every aspect that we thought was uniquely human, and they're building machines which do some degree of that. How far is it going to go? We don't know. We'll find out.
Now, you mentioned emergent intelligence, which is something different from simply programming it and it does whatever you program it to do. What exactly do you mean by emergent intelligence in a machine?
Well, sort of early on in the history of artificial intelligence, there were sort of two schools of thought, the neats and the scruffies. The neats viewed that intelligence should be based on mathematical logic, it should be precise, you should encode the world in mathematics, essentially, and build a mathematics machine which can then use theorem proving as a way to sort of make, decisions about the world. The scruffy says, no, that's not how biology works. What you should really do is build little systems that can learn and throw them together in a kind of random way and maybe use, analogs, computer analogs of evolution to allow these systems to adapt and build themselves. And the field has sort of swung from one pole to the other, where one was popular for a while and the other would become popular. My own belief is that the two need to merge, and I see signs that that's happening right now, that we both have very precise and rich semantics about the world, and these systems are able to learn. So all of the speech recognition systems, no person sat there and encoded how each word sounds. What they did is they built up a huge database of people saying different things, and then they used that to train a simulated neural network, a circuit sort of like a brain, real biological neuron, where it has adjustable parameters, and the system adjusts the parameters to best fit the training data, and it learns something that its creator didn't necessarily know it was going to learn.
The creator might not even know what's going on inside the machine now, but it's some. Do you think there's a risk we're going to put too much trust in these machines? We'll say, we don't really know how it works, we don't understand it totally, but we created it, it must be good, and whatever it tells us to do, we're going to do it.
Yeah, in fact, that's been one of the primary areas of my own focus, because the special kind of machine learning that I've been very interested in are systems which actually understand their own design. Way back in 1962, there was a guy named I.J. Good, a statistician, who had the insight that if we do succeed in building AI systems, one thing that they're going to be very good at is designing other technological devices. In particular, they can design improvements to themselves. And so we should expect that, yeah, we built the first one, but that first one will then build a better successor to it, and that one will build a better successor, and we'll get kind of an intelligence explosion. And in fact, there's a new book out called Our Final Invention that's based on that idea that says that once these systems get to a certain level of power, then no longer will humans be inventing and designing new systems, that rather these very smart systems will be. Well, that sounds great, except that we maybe understand the first system. Do we understand the one that it builds? Do we understand the one that that one builds? It quickly can get to a place where they're behaving in ways that we don't understand. And so the challenge is, can we design technology that will ensure that even though if we don't understand the details, that our goals and our values, our human values, are respected by those future machines that are built.
So do you have any optimism that it's going to turn well in the long term? Because it seems we can go a lot of different directions, because people will certainly use the technology to benefit themselves against other people. It can certainly be used as a weapon. It can have inadvertent harmful effects. We have to deal with a lot of questions, and maybe the technology is advancing a little faster than we're dealing with the questions.
Yeah, I think that's a serious issue. I'm actually very optimistic, and in fact, most of my work is about how do you encode what our values are? How do you encode, once you've envisioned, yes, this is the kind of society we want, how do you build that into an intelligent system so that it actually comes about? And I think we're making great progress in that area. You're absolutely right that there will be people One of the big areas is financial trading. Right now, 70% of all the trades on the stock exchange are actually automated systems, and they're happening too fast for any human to make any decision in there. And so I think we can expect to see that kind of arms race, really going more and more. We can expect to see the military arms races going more and more. At the same time, I think there'll be a broader awareness and interest in this whole area. There are two recent movies. There's the movie Her, we started talking about a man who falls in love with his AI system that really, explores some of the emotional aspects. And then there's a new movie, a new Johnny Depp movie called Transcendence is coming out in a couple of months that I think takes a more societal view of, what is the effect of these smart systems sort of running everything. And so I think the world at large is going to begin thinking about these questions, and I think we're going to get a lot of input from not just scientists, but from philosophers, from theologians, from artists, and that collection of different insights and visions for where we want to go is, I think, exactly what we need to create a wonderful future society.
Do you think there's a risk that human life might become devalued because of the success of computers? People might feel that a computer is more valuable than a human being. We'd rather sacrifice a human than to lose this machine.
Yeah.
Because the machine is more capable.
Well, it's funny. I was just on NPR on a radio show talking about this movie, Her, and some of the callers calling in said, well, what are you saying about, humans are better than these machines? I want a machine girlfriend. And so already, I think, and in Japan, there's a whole subculture of people that have sort of virtual girlfriends. And so we're beginning to touch that area. It's a very strange and odd sort of zone. People had the tagamuchis where you had to feed your little pet to keep it from dying, and people got very attached to that. The Roomba vacuum cleaner. Some people love their Roomba so much they take it on trips with them, and so I think it's very easy for people to envision and project onto an object a sense of attachment and connection, and for good or for bad.
Now, the human race obviously has a lot of problems. Do you think technology can solve all these problems? Do you think that the answers to human problems ultimately lie in technology, or some things such that humans have to figure them out themselves, like what drives human life, what drives human aggression, why do people do what they do?
Yeah, I think technology is a very powerful tool, and it's primarily a mirror for us. And so it's really going to be our choices that guide where these things go. If we don't control it, you can sort of see what happens in the economic sphere today. Systems running on pure, profit maximization sometimes end up behaving in ways that don't support humanity in the best way. And so I think if we just let these systems sort of run in a pure, economic sense, we won't necessarily like where it ends up. If we put a lot of thought into where do we want this to go and very carefully design them to support the values that we care most about, I think we can create a beautiful, incredible future.
And typically these machines are not built primarily to benefit humanity. It's really the profit motive that is the most important driver. Everyone's in a rush to get their product to market first, even if it has a few little bugs in it. Is it possible to modify the culture that people say, well, the effect we have on the world might even be more important than how much money we make this year?
Well, it's interesting to take, for example, Facebook. When Facebook first started out, it was primarily, a channel to communicate, and people were sharing little things with friends and adding up many Facebook friends. And Facebook, the company, was primarily, trying to figure out how to get ads in there and how to get people hooked up. Well, some social problems arose. There was bullying on Facebook. There were, people who were, getting messages they didn't want to see and so on. And so they've hooked up with the Center for the Greater Good. And they had a day of compassion at the Facebook headquarters where they brought in psychologists talking about the psychology of happiness, the psychology of good, positive emotional communication, and they're building that into their systems. And so I see that as a sort of a positive, simple example of the kind of progression we can expect. It's sort of like the layers of the Maslow hierarchy. When a technology first shows up, it's like getting it to work at all is the important thing. But as it becomes more refined, like if you look at cell phones today, they begin to get more nuance and more subtlety and to connect at the deeper emotional levels with the people that use them. And so I'm very hopeful that that's going to happen. We see.
Getting back to the idea of human thought, because we were touching on this a little earlier, do we have any idea of what thought really is? no one's ever seen a thought, weighed it, measured it in the laboratory, but they seem to exist. Is that related to artificial intelligence? Can a machine really have the property of thought, or is it just a simulation, kind of a mock-up?
Yeah, that I think is one of the core questions quite related to the sort of consciousness question. We can say what we mean by intelligence. What I mean by intelligence is the ability to solve problems to better meet some goal. And by that definition, a lot of animals are intelligent. A dog can figure out, there's lots of great little videos where dogs solving problems to get some food that they want. Or birds. Birds are incredibly intelligent in that regard. Whether our human experience of thought is the same as that is not so clear. You have to sort of identify, well, what is going on? Neuroscientists are beginning to tease apart what biochemically is happening in a brain when an animal or a person makes a choice and does something in the world that solves a problem. We're beginning to understand that at the biochemical level. When you have a computer doing it, of course, it's a very different substrate. It's a program running on silicon hardware, and yet the processes, the mathematical process to solving a problem is very analogous.
And a computer can figure out how to achieve a goal, but can it set the goal? Can it decide what kind of goal would be desirable?
Well, you need to have some meta goal. And one of the things that systems which are goal-seeking, trying to meet goals, do is they try and create sub-goals which will help in the satisfaction of their main goal. And so one of the challenges, I think, as we create these systems is to choose sufficiently broad main goals so that the sub-goals that these systems create themselves actually lead to outcomes that we want.
We're almost out of time. Let me just ask a quick question. You think human beings might become redundant?
Well, I certainly hope not. I think we should be channeling this technology to support our humanity. And one view that sort of a number of people have is to not think of this as an us and a them, that, oh, these new creatures are coming and they're going to be more powerful than us, but rather to think of them as an extension of ourselves. And that as these systems become more powerful, it's really us that's becoming more powerful. And that this is sort of a new age for humanity rather than sort of so
they should be the servants rather than the masters.
Exactly.
Okay. We're going to have to wrap on that note because we are out of time. I'd like to thank my guest, Steve Omohundro. We've been talking about artificial intelligence and where it's leading us. Visit our website, www.futuretalk.net. This is Marty Wasserman for Future Talk. We'll see you next time.
Right.
I believe the microphone should be off.